This is Rob Schmidt tonight with your guest host, Sebastian Gorka. And wow, do we have a show for you tonight. All right, let's begin with the scary phrase, World War III. We have been told for months now that thanks to the actions of a certain former KGB colonel in Ukraine, World War III is imminent. And this week we saw what? We saw this remarkable footage, shocking footage, like something out of a Hollywood movie, of an Su-27 fighter jet from the Russian Federation closing with one of our drones. Yes, a U.S. Air Force drone that cost $32 million, closed with it, dumped its fuel to mess with its engine, actually hit the prop of the drone, which made it crash into the Black Sea. We had every right to be there. It's international airspace, but Russia was sending a message. Why? Well, because they don't want anybody interfering with what's happening in Ukraine. You've seen the awful footage of the last 13 months. The war crimes, the devastation, the targeting of civilian areas, even maternity clinics, the mass graves in Bucha and elsewhere, the stories of whole families being found bound together in mass graves, the parents and the children. Here's a reminder from Mayor Klitschko of Kiev of what Russian warfare really looks like.
What happened here and everywhere in Ukraine, what is happening, this is not special operation. This is not military objects. This is civilians. They've been shot in the head with the tight hands behind their back. This is genocide of the Ukrainian population. And that's exactly what Russian regime, Putin's regime, Russian army is doing, killing the civilians.
How did we get here? How did we arrive at war in Europe again? It's very, very simple. You don't have to be a former strategist in the White House. You don't have to have a background in geopolitics. It's a very simple equation. When America is weak, when we don't have a robust identity that we project to the world, bad things happen and bad men do bad things. This week, my former boss, President Trump, issued a very brief 3-minute video. We'll show a little clip here where he gave a very frank diagnosis of what happens when America no longer leads.
We have never been closer to World War III than we are today under Joe Biden. A global conflict between nuclear-armed powers would mean death and destruction on a scale unmatched in human history. It would be nuclear Armageddon. Nothing is more important than avoiding that nightmare. We will avoid it, but we need new leadership.
Now, what happened whilst he was the commander-in-chief, whilst he was in the White House? Here's a little reminder of how safe the world is and what American leadership looked like. The same nation, Russia, didn't invade anybody's countries when we were in the White House, but they did try to destabilize the Middle East. And when we, President Trump's staffers, told him that 300 Russian mercenaries, members of the Wagner Group that are directly subordinated to the Kremlin, were destabilizing Syria, President Trump didn't invade. He ordered the Pentagon to kill them. That hasn't happened since 1917, since the Russian Revolution. An American president said, "We don't need you destabilizing an already unstable part of the world. Kill the Russians now." And Vladimir Putin, because he's afraid of President Trump, didn't even hold a press conference. Think about that. But it's not just in Europe. Do you remember oh, he has such mean tweets we heard for years on end? Well, those tweets were often tools of statecraft. That classic one for little Kim in Pyongyang, reminding the small dictator that my button is bigger than your button, sent a very clear message. Don't mess with America because we are back. Or whether you're a sponsor, the largest sponsor of state terrorism in the world today, of course, that's the mullahs in Iran. When you have one of your generals, Soleimani, running around the Middle East planning attacks against US troops, what did President Trump do? He said, kill him. With such precision that the people traveling in the vehicle with Soleimani, they weren't killed. He was sitting in his seat. Then, another message of American leadership, not invasions, this isn't the neocons, this isn't the neoliberals, this isn't the Bush administration, but when we saw, this is now declassified, I can talk about it openly, when we saw the Syrian regime, Bashar al-Assad, the evil dictator of Syria, preparing to use chemical weapons again to target civilians in his own country, men, women, and children, President Trump heard that and he said, okay, that air base, Assad's air base, drop 59 cruise missiles on top of that air base to send a message, not just to Damascus, but to every tin pot dictator around the world. And by the way, what was happening at the time? Do you remember at the same time there was a quasi-state visit from the Chinese premier, Xi Jinping? He was in Washington, D.C. He went to Mar-a-Lago. And then there was that classic moment President Trump shared with the world after he ordered the 59 cruise missiles to deploy against Assad, that he leaned over and whispered through the interpreter to Xi Jinping over chocolate cake at Mar-a-Lago. By the way, Xi, I've just dropped 59 cruise missiles on that regime. Get the message? Not intervention, not the 82nd Airborne, not invasion, but just a message. Don't do that. Chemical weapons, bad, and you'll pay a price. And he led by example. Just the imagery of this president, the 45th president, walking across the DMZ in Korea. Just stunning. No battalions of armed soldiers, no Secret Service detail, just a man showing the world, we're not afraid of you, little Kim. And if you want peace, I'm the man to broker the deal. That's what leadership looks like. And that's why we didn't have to worry about World War III when he was in the Oval. Instead, today, we have overweight disgraces to the US military like Mark Milley, who still, even after the surrender of Afghanistan, the most senior military officer in the United States, have this is his response to Russia downing one of our aircraft. Just listen.
As far as an active war goes, I'm not going to go there. Incidents happen, and clearly we do not seek armed conflict with Russia, and I believe that at this point we should investigate this incident and move on from there.
Yeah, tough words. Yeah, we're not interested in conflict, but maybe Russia is interested in conflict. Oh, and you're going to investigate? Congratulations, Mark Milley. Shall we remind the world what you're really interested in? Your embarrassment to America. White rage. Do you remember him testifying on Capitol Hill? This is what he really cares about.
I want to understand white rage, and I'm white, and I want to understand it.
Yeah, maybe you should study our enemies, not your white rage. What does this all mean? What does Moscow think of our response? Let's ask a man who knows about leadership, who served in uniform in 2 of our armed services, served in the cabinet of the 45th President of the United States. He's our senior national security expert here at Newsmax, former Secretary for Veterans Affairs, Robert Wilkie. Welcome to Rob Schmitt Tonight.
Good to see you, Doctor. By the way, you missed the most revealing part of that Milley Austin press conference, where the Secretary of Defense was very concerned about the environmental damage that the downed drone would do to the Black Sea.
Yeah, thank you. I tried to file that in the absurd column that, you know, they're worried about the debris in the Black Sea, not this actual act of war. As a man who served in our armed services, what does it mean when another nation, a nuclear nation, says, okay, we're going to take down one of your aircraft? What is that a sign of when it comes to what they think of us, Secretary Wilkie?
Well, it's a sign that you and I grew up watching with Jimmy Carter, a sign that went away with Ronald Reagan, a sign that once again appeared with Obama Biden and disappeared with Trump. Anytime you have people who, in positions of leadership, denigrate their country, essentially going around the world saying we're not worthy to have the riches and the power that we do have, that creates an opening for the ruthless, for the megalomaniacs, the dictators march, and that is what we are seeing now. The other part of this weakness parade on the part of Joe Biden, and it has gone unreported in the press, we've just seen a cataclysm begin in the Middle East. After years of Biden and Sullivan and Blinken denigrating our old ally in Saudi Arabia, calling them pariahs and all sorts of names, what happened? The Chinese landed in Riyadh and brokered a deal between the Saudis and their ancient enemies, the Iranians. That tips the scales in the Middle East, and it's all at the feet of this president.
Yeah, absolutely. The real stories behind the stories that the mainstream media don't want you to know about, but that we cover here on Newsmax. Stay with us, Secretary Wilkie. We'll return to you later in the show. But let's switch azimuth right now. A second part of that video from President Trump 2 days ago was about the threat that's not external, it's internal and maybe even larger. Listen to what President Trump had to say about the biggest danger to America.
It's the globalist class that has made us totally dependent on China and other foreign countries that basically hate us. These globalists want to squander all of America's strength, blood, and treasure, chasing monsters and phantoms overseas while keeping us distracted from the havoc they're creating right here at home. These forces are doing more damage to America than Russia and China could ever have dreamed.